The day has finally arrived, the day that every Quad Cortex owner has been waiting for. CorOS 3.0.0 has now been released to the public, and it brings us a ton of new features and quality of life updates and the highly anticipated Plug In Compatibility feature. Now, earlier this year, I donated my personal home studio Quad Cortex to my band's pedalboard fly rig that we built for our Latin America tour, and if you would like to check out a video about that process, you can click the card that pops up. I don't remember if it's on this side or this side, but you can click the card that pops up and go watch a video about that whole build process. I elected to leave my Quad Cortex on those pedal boards with our gear in our storage for future fly dates. So I've been waiting to replace that Quad Cortex here in my home studio. And recently I was in Nashville watching all of these CorOS 3.0 videos rolling out, thinking I was going to miss out on the release week of CorOS and have to kind of live vicariously through all of the content creators on YouTube. But then I arrived home from Nashville to a surprise. I guess it's not a surprise. I did order it and I did purchase it, but I didn't realize that it was going to come just in time for the CorOS 3.0.0 drop. Full disclosure, I did open it up and I did plug it in and update it yesterday. However, I have not messed with any of the new features, so we're going to go through all of that together. Before we go any further, let's do a quick overview of all of the new features that this update brings us, but I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole because Neural already put out their own deep dive video a few days ago on their channel, and I think it's super great and really informative, and there's bound to be a dozen other videos from other content creators that will come out over the next week or two of the same topic. So I want to make this video more about real world application and how I plan to implement some of these updated features in my own personal presets for my band to tour on for the rest of the year and into the future. Let's do a quick scan through the changelog. So the first thing we come to here is going to be the main talking point about this update for a very long time, and that's the highly anticipated plugin compatibility. Now this is rolling out with just the Gojira X and Pliny X plugins to start. So if you own a license for either of those plugins, you'll be able to use those inside of your Quad Cortex starting now. And then in the future, there will be more updates that bring more of the X series of plugins into the Quad Cortex as well. And I also believe there's an update coming in the future that allows us to share presets between the Quad Cortex and the computer and vice versa. So in theory, you could record your record using the Neural DSP plugins, create a guitar or bass tone that you really like, export that at the end of tracking, import it into your Quad Cortex, and then use that exact same guitar or bass tone in a live setting, which is pretty cool. Moving on from that, we have sidechaining, which weirdly enough, I may be more excited about than plugin compatibility, at least for me personally. I just think there's going to be a lot of creative ways to use this within a preset, and even just something as simple as a sidechain gate. My favorite hardware gate is this little Zuul pedal or the full-size Zuul pedal. They both do the same thing, but we can now effectively recreate this with sidechaining a gate inside of the Quad Cortex. Moving forward from that, we have custom folders. Now this won't really affect me because I'm not using a ton of different presets. I don't have a ton of different IRs. However, if you are somebody who's loaded down with presets and IRs, this is really great for you. Anything to improve organization, it's just going to make building presets and overall workflow better. And that kind of ties in with this next one, bulk actions, which I do actually love. And I wish I would have had it at the time when I was trying to figure out which IR to use in my preset, because I loaded a ton on, picked one and deleted all the rest, and deleting them all one by one was a nightmare. Being able to select multiple presets or IRs, move them to somewhere else, delete them, whatever it may be, that's really awesome. Again, anything efficiency, workflow related, I really love. Those are both really great quality of life improvements for the unit as a whole. Dynamic latency compensation. Again, something I'm probably not going to worry too much about. I've not really had any of the phasing issues that it's referring to here, but it's very cool that it is a setting within the unit that we can now toggle on and off if that does ever become a problem. Moving on from that, we're going to skip over the internet check. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. And we're going to get right into the new devices. So you see that they list here, the very first things is Gojira X and Pliny X. And this is all of the modules from inside of the plugins as their own blocks. And this is really cool because now we can mix and match these two plugins together in ways we were never able to before. We could use the Gojira Boost with a Pliny Head, with a Gojira Cab and a Pliny Reverb. And on top of that, we can mix and match all of these with the stock QC blocks as well and kind of make our own custom archetype plugin. All right, moving forward from here, we have a new delay. It's a circular delay. I believe this is based on a Lexicon unit. The compressors here are not new, but they are side chainable versions of the compressors that were in the unit before. Into the pitch section, we have pitch correction, which is crazy. It's monophonic, basically auto-tune in a sense. Pretty wild that that's now built into the unit as well. And then we have the transpose function. I believe this is pretty similar to the transpose that's in all of the X versions of the Neural DSP plugins, similar to the pitch shifter block, but way more simple in control. I believe it only has one dial instead of the 3 that are in the pitch shifter block. And I might actually swap in the transpose block instead of the pitch shifter block in my presets. We'll check that out as well. Into the envelope, we've got an envelope filter, sidechainable. We've got the plugin graphic 9 EQ. I don't really use it within the plugin, but it's cool that they have it. Under utility, we've got what I'm most excited about, the adaptive gate with sidechain, which is what we're going to use to effectively recreate a Zuul inside the Quad Cortex. Then we've got the doubler and the plugin doubler. I believe the plugin doubler is just a one knob thing, exactly as it is in the Neural DSP plugins. The doubler, I think, has a wet dry. We'll check that out when we get into Cortex control. Plugin blend, plugin gate. Transparent blend is very cool from the videos I've seen, and I think we're going to see a lot of really interesting presets made with this. So I'm excited to mess around with this a little bit too. Preset MIDI out is something that probably won't make its way into my workflow. I use a bunch of control changes from our playback to do scene and preset changes for the Quad Cortexes. But if you're somebody who's using MIDI controllable effects pedals, maybe like in the effects loop of your Quad Cortex, this could be pretty cool for you. You can now send up to 12 MIDI CC changes, CC toggles, or program changes from the press of one foot switch, and up to 4 MIDI CC messages from your expression pedals, which is pretty wild. So it sounds like you can get pretty in-depth and pretty advanced with your MIDI programming now from the press of just one button on your Quad Cortex. And the rest of this here is just about bug fixes and updates to Cortex control. We won't get into that right now. But on that note, let's jump over into Cortex control and mess around with some of these new features. And before we go any further, I just want to take a second to say that if you are someone who is planning to use your Quad Cortex live, I would maybe wait to update. They did extensive beta testing for this update, but there's no way to test as thoroughly as getting the product out into the market and having literally thousands and thousands of people play it in all sorts of different use cases. So there will probably be a couple bugs that slip through the cracks. That's completely normal with any company. So if you have an important show or you're going on tour, I would maybe wait to update. I'm comfortable updating now because this is my personal unit for home use, and I won't have to go out on the road for another month or two. So I have some time. I'm sure there will be some sort of quick patch before then. I would, just to be on the safe side, I would maybe wait a little bit. If you don't have an important gig or you like living your life on the edge, well, go ahead and update, and let's dive into the update together. This is the Cortex Control app. This is Neural DSP's app that allows you to interface your Quad Cortex directly with your computer. Just makes it easier for me to share with you guys what I'm doing in the Quad Cortex without having to film the unit that is placed underneath my desk. So rest assured that everything you see me doing here on the computer is happening also on the Quad Cortex under my desk. And I will also mention that if you are updating to CorOS 3.0.0, you also have to update your version of Cortex Control to version 1.1.0. Now, as I said earlier, I did go ahead and update my Quad Cortex yesterday, but I didn't go through and mess with any of the new features yet. As you can see here on the left side in these folders, it is telling me that there are new features to check out in the folders. The only one not showing that's the plugins. That's only because I clicked on it to see what the folder structure looked like. I was curious what that was going to look like. Now that we're in this folder, let me go ahead and mention that if you own licenses for Gojira X or Pliny X, you have to go to the Neural DSP website and connect your iLock account to your Neural DSP account. Once you do that, you'll be able to come back here in Cortex Control or even directly on the Quad Cortex itself. Click this refresh button, and you will be granted access to all of the features of the plugins within your Quad Cortex. Okay, so I think what we should do next here is let's go and check out some of the plugin compatibility stuff, because I will be using some modules from the plugins in updating one or two of my presets. And I think we should check out what the plugin presets can bring to the table as a whole before we start pulling out pieces of it to throw in my presets. So let's go over here to directory. Let's go down to plugins. And why not? Let's start with the Gojira X default. I have used this in my writing sessions a million times. Most of the time, I don't even change the way it sounds because it sounds so great right out of the gate. So let's see what it sounds like. I mean, it sounds sick. It literally just rips right out of the gate, and that's the same thing I expect out of the plugin. So no shock there for me. On a selfish level, I want to go now and check out the preset that I made for this plugin and see how that translates. So let's go down here into the artist tab. Let's go to my name and let's check out Juggernaut. I mean, it sounds pretty sick. The Gojira plugin suite, I think, is just the best for heavy stuff that you can get. But you know what? On the other side of that is I do think that the Pliny plugin is probably one of the best plugins you can get for like prettier, clean stuff. So let's go in here. Let's check out some artist presets. Rabia's always got really sick stuff. Let's see what he's got. Clean Dreams. Sounds like exactly what I'm looking for. Let's go split coil for this. Yeah, I mean, what more could you possibly ask for out of a clean amp? And the Pliny stuff can get heavy too, but I think where it really excels is the pretty shimmery clean stuff. I do want to point out that they did make some UI adjustments to the plugin blocks so that you can now identify what is what on your grid. So the Pliny stuff is identified by the PLI on the top of the block, whereas the normal Quad Cortex blocks, the stock ones, don't have any lettering. And if we go over to a Gojira one, it will have GOJ on top of it to obviously identify Gojira. So now when you're looking down at your grid and your signal flow, you can see exactly what's what and distinguish between what's a stock block, what's a Gojira block, and what's a Pliny block. I think what I really want to do now is jump back into my presets and kind of update them with some of the new features we have in 3.0.0. Let's load up my main preset here. All right, I think the first thing I want to do here is actually come over to my A sharp preset. I want to try swapping out this pitch shifter block for the transpose block. Now, these pitch shifter blocks, they do sound great. I have no issue with how they sound, but what I like more about the transpose block is that it is only one dial as opposed to three. I'm not doing any sort of fine pitch shifting or using the mix knob to blend in any of the dry signal. I'm just changing my tuning. And so I think that a less is more approach will be better for that, which is exactly what the transpose gives me. So here is no pitch shift. Here's a half step down. Whole step down. Step and a half. And just for fun, let's do something like 9. Obviously, that is ridiculous, and any pitch shifting you do going down that far is going to start getting a bit artifacty. but one thing to note is that it is still tracking incredibly well. I don't feel any sort of wild latency or anything like that, which is really what would start messing me up if I was using this live. And then, typically if you stay somewhere in the whole step to step and a half range, you don't really notice any artifacting at all. And that's what I try to stick to with my band. So this preset calls for a half step down. And that sounds pretty good to me. I want to compare to the pitch shifter real quick, side by side. Let's bring this up to a half step here. Back to pitch shifter. And back to transpose. They're so close on an audio side that I think that it's best to just go simple. Less things that could potentially get bumped or messed up. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this one too. I'm going to drop a transpose block here as well. I'm going to deactivate this one, but it is going to be set to a whole step down. I've got a weird method for why I have 2 on here. It's because of a specific song in our discography that we play on occasion. It makes things more complicated than it needs to be honest with you. One day I will find a workaround for this and I'll be able to take the second one off of here. Okay, so let's go do the same thing on the other presets. Go ahead and save this. Okay, we're going to come over here to the A preset. Okay, so what I want to get into next here is a little bit of the sidechaining feature that was added in this update, and I want to try to recreate this Zuul pedal. Now, what makes this Zuul pedal so magical is that, yes, it could be run as a normal gate by plugging your guitar in the input and running out of the output into your amp and calling it a day, but the real magic comes with this key input. This key input is essentially a sidechain, and it allows you to place this pedal anywhere in your signal chain, including in the effects loop of your amp, which is going to be getting the most noise and would typically be the hardest point to gate your setup. But the key input allows you to open and close the gate based on your clean guitar signal, effectively giving you super tight gating. Now we're going to do this by coming here and removing this utility gate, and then we'll scoot our 2 amp blocks over. Hold it right there, Chris from 3 days ago. It is Chris from the present, and you are doing it wrong. Well, not wrong, but it doesn't work the way you want it to. I was trying to run the gate after the amp and the cab, and then I also tried running it between the amp and the cab, kind of like I would with the actual Zuul pedal, and it wasn't really working right. Every now and then it was chopping off the attack, usually between 2 sets of chugs, almost like the gate either wasn't closing from the one before fast enough or wasn't able to open up fast enough after the one before. Whatever it was chopping off some of the attack, and it was kind of driving me crazy. So I found the way that it works the best for the time being. So I reverted back to the original gate that I was using in this spot, which is the utility gate. And we're going to put this new adaptive gate sidechained in this spot right here. So let's go over and swap it for the adaptive gate, set the source to input 1, and set the noise reduction to 50%. Super tight and clean. I'm getting all of my pick attack in there. I don't feel like I'm losing anything. And I may even be able to crank this this noise reduction up a little bit more. That's a thing that I will kind of set in its final position once I get into a real world setting of rehearsal or a live show, and know just how much of my hand noise and anything like that is coming through. So in the meantime, I've gone ahead and put the gate in this position with these settings on all of my presets, and it is working great on all of them. Super tight, really clean. I'm not losing any sustain or anything like that, and I do actually think it is an improvement over the utility gate that I was running before. Now on that note, back to Chris from 3 days ago. Okay, and now all of the presets have been updated to utilize this Zuul style gating system. It's actually perfect that the last preset to tweak here was the washed away preset from the last video, because I want to end this video by tweaking this just a little bit more. We used the Pliny plugin and the Gojira plugin to get some of the final sounds for the song Wash It Away. So I want to try mixing and matching some of the blocks from both plugins into this preset to see if it'll get us just a little bit closer to the actual album tones. So let me switch to a guitar in the proper tuning, and then we'll dig into that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to tweak here is actually this poly octaver pedal. Now the main riff does do the octave blend thing. And to achieve that on the record, we actually used the octave pedal in the Gojira plugin. We bypassed all of the other modules in the plugin and ran that octave pedal into Archetype Nolly, if I remember correctly. And since we have the Gojira octave pedal, let's go ahead and replace it. And again, we get the updated UI that I mentioned earlier with the GOJ at the top so that we know that this block came from the Gojira plugin. And I do know that this is like a sub octave. We don't need that. And let's see what a 50-50 blend sounds like. Let's try turning the octave down just a little bit. It actually does feel quite a bit closer to the blend on the record now. Yeah, I think I'm good with that for now. Again, like I said in the video for making this preset, I kind of have to adjust this stuff when we get into a rehearsal scenario and we're all playing together. But for now, this is going to do the job. And I do have to remember to assign this to scenes because this, you know what, I'm going to turn it off. Then assign it to scenes. If you're wondering why I'm doing it in that order, you should go check out the video where I built this preset. Okay, so it should only be on in the scenes we want. Let me go through and make sure that it's good. Ambient verse 2. Yep, what's this one labeled as? Full octave down. We do need to automate it on for this, and then we do need to set these assign to scene, assign to scene. For this one, we're gonna turn that all the way to 0. This all the way to 100. I don't know what they did different with this Gojira octave pedal, but I do think it is much better than the poly octaver. Or maybe it's just the fact that it's exactly what we used on the record, and that's what my ear is used to hearing. This just means I'm going to get so much closer to the actual album tone, and that makes me pretty stoked. Let me go through here and make sure we don't need it anywhere else. Lo-fi octave blend, I do know we need it on for this. And that should be this blend right here. Okay, so that's good. Let's go ahead and save this now. Okay, and so the next thing I want to do is come to this gate here. I want to assign the power to scenes because I need it to be off for the next scene we're going to edit, which is scene E, ambient verse 2. We're going to turn it off, save. And then we're going to come down here. We actually got a big portion of this sound from the Pliny plugin. And so I want to try to get a little bit closer. So we're going to start by replacing this Zuul compressor with the Pliny compressor. So let's double click that, get that in there. Crank this compression up somewhere in that range. Let's check it out. Now I feel like we need a bit more mix on our delay with this compressor now. Let's try it one more time. It's pretty close. Let's go to like 65 and then we'll call it there. And we'll go ahead and save that. Now, honestly, I've been sitting here racking my brain. I can't figure out why I can't get one of the Pliny amps. And I should say I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized what was going on. So the Quad Cortex CPU was split between lanes 1 and 2 and then 3 and 4. So 1 and 2 get half of the CPU power, 3 and 4 get the other half. And as you can see, I'm pretty heavy-handed on the first half of the CPU right now. So I'm going to do a bit of rearranging here so that I can move this clean amp down to the second half of the CPU. And then I should be able to use one of these Pliny amps. Hey, it's me from the future again. I just want to take a second to go over how I actually ended up organizing and building this out, because by the time that I figured out what was going wrong the other day, I was so flustered that I just did it really sloppily and didn't really take time to think it out. So if I come over here to E, you'll see that the entire first row turns off and the splitter does bring the signal down into row 2 for this delay and compressor pedal from the Pliny plugin. That's mainly because I can't fit it down here and I had the space here, so I just went ahead and did that. And after that, it jumps down into row 3 into the Pliny Crunch amp, and then the Pliny Cab, and then the Pliny Reverb, and then it hits another reverb. And I went through and tried to match the settings as close as I could to how we had the settings in the Pro Tools session. So let's go ahead and check out what this sounds like. Now, while that may not be 100% the same as what's on the record, man, is it close, and it's way closer than it was before. And that's because instead of trying to replace the tools that we use to achieve this tone on the record, now we can just use the same tools in the Quad Cortex, and that's wild. And on top of that, we're mixing modules from both Pliny and Gojira in this preset, along with the stock QC blocks. And honestly, I've never felt more inspired to just dive into building new tones and experimenting. The possibilities are just endless. Let's get back to Chris from the past. And on that note, I just want to say, don't be afraid to experiment. Now that we have these plugins in the Quad Cortex and they come with these really awesome artist presets, and hell, like I said, I've even used the default Gojira preset for writing sessions. I've even set stuff out for mixing with the default Gojira preset. It sounds great, but I just hope for you that you don't just stop there. Experiment, mix and match. Load a Gojira preset and then throw a bunch of Pliny blocks in it. Load a Pliny preset and throw a bunch of Gojira blocks in it. There are so many possibilities. The Quad Cortex is becoming so powerful. It is a tool to create something new, fresh, and special. And every update they give us is just making it easier to do so. So my closing thoughts on this update, the plug-in compatibility was absolutely worth the wait. I know that it was a bit frustrating for a lot of people because it was one of the early promises to come along with the Quad Cortex. You know, stuff happens. They've done everything they could to get it to us as soon as possible, but I think that the final product that we have here now very much shows that it was absolutely 100% worth the wait, and it just is promising for a very bright future for other plugins to be ported over to the Quad Cortex. And even though I didn't really touch on it much in this video, I do also really appreciate the quality of life updates they gave us by way of the organizational functions and the updated GUI of the blocks on the grid, so now that we can see which plugin the blocks came from or if they're a stock plugin. And anything of that sort is just going to streamline and optimize the whole experience of using the Quad Cortex. So any updates like that will always be welcome in my book. Now that we have plugin compatibility, I'm already starting a wish list for new features I would love to see in future updates. The first thing is I would love to see the transpose block that we just got in this update moved into the input block, like the input gate. And I would also love for it to be scene assignable so that we could change tuning and pitch via scenes and also save a block on our grid. The second one's a little out there, and it only came to mind because of a post I saw in the Quad Cortex user group on Facebook, but it would be really cool if we could change the foot switches from latching to momentary. I feel like there's some really cool effect options that we would have if that was a possibility. I don't know if it's even possible at all, but if it is, I would love to see that come in a future update. And the last one's probably a pretty big ask, and I know that, and I'm okay with waiting, but that is seamless preset switching, the same way we have seamless scene switching. This is a feature that came to the Axe effects in recent updates. Talk about ultimate flexibility. To be able to go to any preset you want without the dip in audio, and then also access all 8 scenes within that preset without any dip in audio. You can do anything at any time, access any sound you want, and I just think that the Quad Cortex becomes an unstoppable force at that point. And one more quick note. I know that I didn't go over the circular delay or the transparent blend or some of the other features that I mentioned that we may get into in this video, but this started running a bit longer than I was anticipating, and I don't want this to be a 2-hour long video. So maybe what I will do is do a second video where maybe I'll build a couple presets that I will throw up on my Cortex Cloud account for you guys to download and we will utilize some of those new features. So yeah, sorry about not getting to that in this video, but there will be another one, and I'll get some presets out for you guys. And on that note, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to watch this video. There's more content on the way. In fact, there's more Quad Cortex content on the way. The next video is going to cover automating all of the functions within the Quad Cortex via MIDI from an Ableton playback session. So if that's the kind of thing you're into, or maybe you just like general music gear stuff, anything nerdy music, really, or maybe you want to see a tour vlog every now and then this is the right place for you. So be sure to hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell, and we'll see you in the next one.